I'm going to start this session with what may be the dumbest question you will ever be asked, because the answer is pretty obvious. And that is, have you ever been criticized? I'm sure the answer is yes. We've all been criticized by our parents, our friends, our coaches. When we were little, our teachers. Even the most perfect person gets criticized by somebody. And typically, criticism isn't viewed as a friend. It is viewed as hurtful, negative. Most of us do what we can to avoid criticism. In fact, we tend to either consciously or subconsciously guide our behavior to avoid criticism. We may not go over to somebody's house because we know when we walk in the door, that person sooner or later is going to have a stinging criticism for us because that's who they are. They're a negative person. There are teachers that are incredibly critical. Today we have whole sectors of society that seem to criticize for the slightest thing so that we can't even freely express ourselves without being criticized, because what we say may not be perfect. It may not be comfortable. And heaven forbid we should say something uncomfortable to somebody, because that shows insensitivity, and they call us a lot of names when we do that. So criticism has a pretty bad rap. And yet, criticism can become one of your strongest allies. In the next couple sessions, we're going to look at the right way to deal with criticism when you receive it, and then the right way to give it when you must give it. I will tell you that very few people I've ever met in my lifetime have figured out the right way to deal with criticism. Believe it or not, the richest man who ever lived, King Solomon, I wrote a book years ago called The Richest Man Who Ever Lived, King Solomon's Secrets to Success, Wealth, and Happiness. It was about the things that Solomon revealed in the book of Proverbs. And one of the things he reveals over and over again is that criticism can be one of the best things that happens to us. He said, the wounds of a friend are better than secret love. Now, I don't know if you've ever been in love, but if you've been in love, you know that once it starts to happen and that crush really becomes an infatuation to where all you can think about is that other person, and you can't wait to hear their voice on the phone. You can't wait to get a text. You can't wait to be one-on-one with them, okay? That kind of anticipation and excitement and fulfillment and joy. Solomon says, the wounds of a friend are better than secret love. Why? How can he say that? Because they're wounds. They hurt you. Nobody's ever gotten a wound that didn't hurt. You know, even a small cut hurts for a while. And he's saying that it's better, that the criticism is better. Why? Because when you learn the right way to use criticism, it will become one of your best teachers, just like failure. Now, I compare criticism. We used to go to take our kids to a particular beach on Coronado Island outside of San Diego. And in the morning, the beach is covered with what seem to be flakes of gold. It's really not, but it's something that looks like gold. And it's really quite cool. And I like to compare criticism to when we would grab a bucket of that sand, and of course, the water is receding, but you get the water too. And so any criticism is like that bucket of water with sand. When it's first thrown on you, the first thing you notice is what? The water. It's cold, and it sends a shiver down you, and you react. You kind of want to get away, and you get a little upset at the person that threw it on you, right? But it's only water. Well, the water in a criticism is the exaggeration. It's that part of the criticism where there are stereotypes or there are superlatives. You never do this. You always do that. The always and the never, they're superlatives. And that's the water. It's an exaggeration. It's oftentimes an overreaction to something we've done or said. And what does water do? Does it kill you? No. Do you drown in? No, not when it's just thrown on you. You go ahead and you brush it off. You don't pay attention to the exaggerations, the stereotypes, the superlatives. You wash it from your face. If it got your shirt wet, if you had a shirt on, you take your shirt off. If it got you wet and you didn't have a shirt on, you grab a towel, okay? It's not a big deal. It's only water. And then there's the stand. That's the part that gets in your eyes and it kind of stings and it blurs your vision. The sand of criticism are the things that tend to be true. They sting because there's a little bit of truth in it. If it's not totally true, there's a little bit. Gary Smalley one time said a man that was near him at a table, they ordered dessert and his wife was a little overweight and all the man said was, you gonna eat all that? And the wife, it was to her, it was a slap in the face. It was saying, you are so fat and ugly, the last thing you should be doing is eating dessert. And you're actually going to eat that? That's how she heard it. Do you remember us talking about communication and how perception is oftentimes worse than reality? And a man may throw what he thinks is a little pebble and it lands on a woman and she considers it a ginormous boulder that crushes her. That's how criticism can be. And it can be as simple as just that little implication. You going to eat all that? Maybe you should leave some is what it's implying because you're overweight and you need self-control. So just one little thing like that is a criticism. And that's the sin. Maybe the wife is overweight. Maybe she's on her way to becoming diabetic. And when you become diabetic, there can be some terrible consequences of that. Blindness, amputations, all sorts of things. So the sand is the part that stings, that gets in your eye, blurs your vision. That's a little bit of truth that's in there, maybe a lot of truth. And what do you do with the sand? You have to wash it out, get it out of your eyes. And here comes the good part. Inside every criticism is a little bit of gold. Sometimes it's a tiny gold flake. Sometimes it's a gold nugget. But the point is you have to find that in the sand. It's now on the ground. It's been thrown at you in that bucket of water, but it's now hidden somewhere in the sand and you have to do a little digging to find that out. If you remember, when I was fired from job number 3, and this marketing guru looked at me and said, Steve, you're the single greatest disappointment in my entire career. You will never succeed in marketing. You have 20 minutes to clean out your desk. Now, that's a pretty harsh criticism. I was 23 years old, had a brand new baby that was only 9 months old, my first child, and it really hurt me. I mean, the sting to hear that from a marketing guru that you just wasted 4 years of your life at the university getting a degree in marketing only to be told you'll never succeed in marketing. That really stung. But I went home and I did some things I'm going to show you how to do. But one of the first things I did, it's really the last thing we should do. So but I searched for the gold. But before you search for the gold, we want to take the initial pain of the criticism away. And how do you do that? Well, I have found that it is as simple as going through a checklist. The first thing you do is you consider the source. Who was it that said that criticism? Now, in this case, it was my boss, and he was a marketing expert. He had been a vice president of marketing of a Fortune 500 company before he came to our company. And everybody just almost worshiped the ground he walked on, I mean, he was just supposedly the smartest marketing guy out of 3,500 employees. And, so he says, you're the single greatest disappointment in my entire career. Okay, is that really true? Wow, that's pretty sad if his career was so shallow that I was the greatest disappointment. Come on, I've had huge disappointments in my career. I've had disappointments that have cost me millions of dollars. And here I'm a peon working in the company, an assistant product manager, one of the lowest paid guys in the marketing department, and I'm the greatest disappointment in his entire career. Okay, that made no sense. Now he says, you will never succeed in marketing. He is a very smart marketer. But is he God? Does he really think he knows whether or not I will succeed in marketing? As it turns out, my marketing successes a few years later when we started American Telecast were far greater than this guy ever achieved in his lifetime. I generated in my marketing campaigns 40 million phone calls, billions of dollars in sales. He never even came close to anything like that. My first year in American Telecast, I made triple the amount of money that he was making as he had become president of this particular company. And I was making 3 times what he was making my first year, just through my marketing. You see, he's not God. He could not see around the corner. So he had no authority. He had the right to say whatever he wanted, but he had no true authority to pronounce that I was going to be a lifetime failure in marketing. He was wrong. So you consider the source, you consider their expertise, you consider their motivation. There are some critics that actually hate you. Some critics hate me, okay? So their motivation, and that's another thing we have to look at. What's their motivation for saying that? Now, the person that criticized my wife, you know what? They did care about our son. And they really did want the best for him. They were just really misguided, okay? So they were motivated, honestly, they were motivated by love. And so that makes a difference. You do pay attention to that, but it doesn't validate the criticism. So finally, you look at the criticism itself. And there are things that I used to put by a criticism that would tend to really hurt me. Number one, is it emotionally based? And then I'd put an E by it. Is it based on your past experiences or past failures? Now, when that boss gave me that criticism, that was job number 3, and I'd only been out of college for a year and a half. So he knew that this was going to be my 4th job in a year and a half. And so he might have been looking at my past failures. Is it based on their lack of understanding or fully comprehending your goal, your intention, or your vision? You see, criticisms given out of ignorance, most of them are less valid. It doesn't mean there isn't any gold in those criticisms, and we'll see that in a minute. But it means that it's not as bad a criticism as you think. And so if they're giving that criticism because they don't know my goals, they don't understand my vision, they don't know all the circumstances, then it's important for me to write that down and go back to them and say, you know what, you gave this criticism to me and I don't want anything to come between us, and that criticism was kind of hurtful. What you didn't know is, here's my vision, here's my goal, here's why I made that decision. Here's the background. Here's the whole situation. Now, if they are very arrogant and proud, that won't mean a thing to them. But if they're wise and sensible, they'll say, oh, geez, I didn't know that. I wish you had told me. And the next, is it based on their conventional thinking? Realize that most people think within a box, okay? They think within the box of their own limited knowledge and their own limited experience. Imagine somebody trying to be critical of Thomas Edison. Their own experience says the only way we get light is through a fire. And so we use kerosene lights, which have a flame in them. That's all. You can't get lights from something invisible. like electricity. So their understanding creates a very small box. Edison was way outside that box. So most of the time when people would tell him, you're never going to succeed at this, he could think back and he could look and he could say, hey, they're thinking within their own box. I've been out of that box for years. I don't need to, their criticism's not valid, okay? So are they conventional thinking, trying to judge your vision, goal, behavior, because it's outside of a box? Are there criticisms based on logic? See, sometimes logic is a great source of a criticism. It's logical. What does that mean you need to do? You need to either, if it's truly logical, you need to change your behavior or find logic outside of that logic. Once again, maybe you know something the critic doesn't know, and what you know is logical, but you're privy to information and understanding the other person doesn't have. And finally, is it based on the realities of the situation? Criticisms that are based on realities of the situation are good criticism. They're to be paid attention to, but they're not the final word. Why? Because reality changes every hour of every day, and every day of every week, and every week of every month. Reality is constantly changing. And your reality tomorrow may be a completely different reality than it is today. So let's talk about the gold. Once you've wiped off the water, the exaggerations, you've taken the stinging part of the criticism out of your eyes so it can't sting you, and you realize it's sand, now you look for the gold, because even when criticism is motivated by hatred, sometimes it brings us some gold. So when I got to looking for the gold after this boss fired me, I started saying, okay, now why was he so angry? Well, he found out from somebody else that I had applied for a transfer. So he sensed, obviously, that I was being disloyal. And the thought of my being disloyal and wanting to go into another department made him so angry that he said foolish things, hateful things, okay? But where's the gold? Aha, disloyalty is something people react to. So in my next job, working for Mr. Wilcox, I'm going to show him loyalty like no other employee he's ever had. Man, I am going to be by his side. If he wants to achieve something in a week, I'm going to try so hard that we'll achieve it in 2 or 3 days. So I learned that my loyalty had been a reason that boss got mad. And that was a huge piece of gold that for the rest of my career, that was always important to me, that I demonstrate loyalty to my bosses and to the companies that I worked for. Every criticism, it might have a tiny little flake, it might have a giant nugget, but it's just like treasure hunting your adversity. Search for the gold. And when you realize there's gold in every criticism, and that's what Proverbs teaches over and over. It says a foolish man disregards his critics, but a wise man listens to his critics and learns. See, that's what we want. Let criticism be a teacher. You got to get rid of the sand in the eyes, the stinging part. You got to get rid of the exaggeration. And then you can focus and search for the gold.